My name is Mike Dobie. I did a little program for the North Texas Club last month on rebuilding your front suspension. Jeanette, I guess, liked it, so she asked me if I would share it with you guys. So we're going to talk about, well, I'll call front suspension restoration tonight. Jeanette says I have between 45 minutes and an hour. We probably won't need quite that much. So I'm going to spend about 2 minutes and tell you about me, because I know a lot of you I know, a lot of you I don't know, and a lot of you don't know me. But I drove my first Corvair. It was a 1962. And I say drove it. I was actually sitting on my brother-in-law's lap steering it. I was pretty young, and that didn't end well. But anyway, so actually I don't work on Corvairs for anybody but myself. I have never made a dime for Corvair work from anybody. I've sold a couple things, usually at a loss, but other than that, I just like to enjoy working on my own cars and restoring them. And I picked up my first car in Corvair in 1973. I was living in Roanoke, Virginia. I saw it sitting in the Chevrolet dealer, and not knowing very much about it, but I saw it's been sitting there. So I did a little digging around, ended up buying it. It cost me $130. Turned out I was pretty fortunate because it was a 66 CORSA 140. It only needed everything. So I restored it pretty good as a driver. And I drove that while I was in college at Virginia Tech. And it was a good car. When Patty and I got married, we moved to Texas. We drove the Corvair from Roanoke to Texas, and it was our everyday driver for quite a few years. After I got down to Dallas, I was wandering around one day and saw a bunch of Corvairs behind this building, stopped, talked to the guy, and he had a couple that I was interested in. So one was a 65 Corsa convertible, and one was a 66 turbo coupe. The turbo coupe wasn't too bad. He wanted $600 for that. And it was pretty complete, except for the turbo was laying on the back seat. But the convertible had no drivetrain, no top, no nothing, but he wanted $300 for it. So it's total of $900. So I just moved to Texas. We were living in an apartment, but so I went to the bank and asked him if I could borrow $900 to buy 2 old Corvairs. And because I did not have $900. But anyway, he loaned me the money. And I bought the 2 Corvairs. And that was the beginning of my restoring. I restored the 66 pretty quickly after that, and it took me a couple of years. And that car was a concours quality car, and I still had the others, but I hadn't started on the convertible yet, but I had it stored. I was living in an apartment, so I did all this while I was living in a little apartment. And then in about 1978, I picked up this red car that's behind me. It had been sitting behind a garage up on Benton Mountain, Virginia, outside of Roanoke for several years. I'd been seeing it when we would visit Patty's parents. So I managed to find out who owned it and purchased it. And that one cost me $150. So that car I drove to graduate school, and I drove it to Atlanta to the first CORSA convention I ever went to. Was in Atlanta in 1980. This car was in concours, autocross, rally, Ed Cole competition in 1980. I came in second in the Cole competition. We won't get into that. But anyway, that's sort of my history. So I've had Corvairs for coming up on 50 years now, and I enjoy working on them. I just love the cars. And like I said, I'm not in it to make money. I've never fixed a car that I thought I was going to sell, even though I had to. Mainly for space reasons. I've had to move a couple along, but that's enough about me. I'll start talking about Corvairs. I know some of you may be new to Corvairs. I see a lot of the questions on Facebook and those things that come up, and just want to give a plug to Chevrolet and Corsa, telling any new members or new people that own Corvairs. First thing you need to do is you need to buy you a chassis shop manual. Everybody needs one of these. First thing you need to buy if you've got a Corvair. This gives you, it's one for every year, or supplement or book. And mine's starting to look a little rough, but this is the one I've had for quite a few years, and you can see it's been well used. It's good. The other thing you need to buy, and this comes from CORSA. CORSA makes a little money off of it. Is the tech guide. This thing is great. I come up with, there's lots of good ideas for. I use this thing as much as the shop manual. So those are a couple of things you need to buy if you're new here to Corvairs. I know some of you probably been around long as me or longer, and work on them more than I do. So you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Anyway, we're going to talk about restoring a front suspension. This suspension here is one that I'm working on. Pretty close to being done. It's this is out of a '66 CORSA. Actually, this is the suspension that came in this car originally. I rebuilt the suspension in I think it was about 1988 maybe. And when I rebuilt it the first time, I ran it till a few years ago, and I picked up another front suspension. I redid it, swapped it out into this car, so it's got a fresh one in it now. And so I had this one, so I'm redoing it for my next car. And so we'll talk about what I've done to this one, and how you'll go about doing a similar thing. The front suspension, I've had through the years people come to me saying, "Hey, I got a Corvair. I thought these cars handled good, and that seems to be a little squirrely. I can't seem to keep it on the road." And I'll crawl underneath there and say, "Well, they're supposed to have rubber in those bushings you've got on there, and there's not much of it left." So I had one guy. I mean, it was unbelievable. The rubber, how much of it had disintegrated, and he also had 4 tires that were 4 different size tires. 2 were bias-ply, and 2 were radials. And he couldn't figure out why the car didn't handle like I told him they handled well. So anyway, so it's important to get all this stuff, nice new bushings, nice new ball joints, and you'll be amazed. It won't do near as much squeaking. It'll handle much nicer, and you'll be happy with it. So we'll go through what you're going to have to do to redo this thing. The first thing you got to do is get it out of the car. That's the easiest thing you're going to do. Literally, you can get this thing out of the car in 30 minutes. It takes 6 bolts, hold it in, 6 main bolts. Now, of course, some of you that live up north, you may have a little more trouble if it's rusted to pieces, but this one, I guarantee you, I can get it out of the car in 30 minutes. You take 6 bolts and you unhook the 2 brake lines. And as Larry was saying last month on this call, if you probably need to replace those brake lines anyway, so while you got them unhooked, probably a good time to replace them. So once you get it out, then you start disassembling it. The one thing I'll say is most of the bolts in this thing are grade 8 high strength bolts. So you need to really either replace them with high quality bolts or take good care of them when you get them out. The thing about these bolts is I've got a couple here that I'll show you. These 2 bolts are nearly identical, but both of these came out of the same suspension. And this GM likes to do, if you notice, although they're the same bolt, one of them is about 1/8 of an inch longer than the other one. So if you go to replace this, you're not going to be able to go to your hardware store and get the exact lengths, which is probably okay, but it is kind of funny. I guess if you're buying a few million bolts, you can specify a bolt that's 2 3/4 inches long, which you're not going to find. So it's important. Get all your hardware. Try to make a note of where it all came from. What I like to do is I take all this hardware, I throw it in a bucket, and I gather it through the not only the suspension but out of it. You can take it. I take it to a local plater, which they'll do a bucket, what they call bucket plating. You can take them nasty hardware, they throw it in a bucket, they run it through the vat, it comes back, and it all comes back. All this is all used stuff. It all comes back looking beautiful like this. So I like to do that, and I start with all nice clean hardware. Okay. After you get it out of the car, start disassembling it, you're going to find that well, first thing, when you get out of the car, it's not going to look like this. It's going to look more like this, but you can clean it up. This particular suspension has all been after I disassembled it, it was all taken to a powder coater where it was all sandblasted, powder coated with this semi-gloss black. If you're not, I kind of like to, even though I'm not really into making cars perfectly stock, I don't like to change anything from stock if it's not really necessary. I try to stay fairly stock on all my stuff. So you can do a pretty good job of this cleaning this stuff up and painting it. I've done it before, and it works out. You can do a pretty good job with paint, but powder coat is nice. I always tell them to be sure when they powder coat it to blast the powder through this cross member, because that's what rusts out, particularly you guys up north. If you paint it, what I've done on ones I've painted is paint it with good thing to paint it with, particularly if you don't get all the rust cleaned off. It's just POR. I think Clark sells it. Summit Racing sells it. A lot of them sell it. So this stuff's pretty good. The only thing I caution you with POR, it works good on rusty surfaces or sandblasted surfaces. It does not work very good on machine parts that are slick machine metal. I've tried that. It chips off because this stuff is so hard. So anyway, no matter what you're going to paint it with, what I do is stick a rod through here of some sort, dip a rag in paint and drag it through the middle of this thing back and forth a few times to try to paint the inside of this. So you want to try to protect this, particularly you guys up north. If you have one that's not rusted away, you may have one soon if you don't do something to take care of it. Okay, after we got it, start taking it apart. The tough part you're going to have is it is going to need a few specialized tools, particularly when you start taking apart these ball joints and these tie rod ends. In the shop book that I just showed you, it says just take a hammer and tap on them and they'll pop right apart. Well, I've never had much luck doing that. I've beat the heck out of them. They don't come apart. So what I generally use, particularly taking apart an old one, is you got these forks. They're not that expensive. I don't remember where I picked these up. The wider one is for ball joints. The skinnier one is for tie rod ends. You can use this one for both, but you'll tear the boots up. So I try to use the correct one. But this will help you separate them. So you got to separate those ball joints, tie rod ends in some fashion before you can, as you can disassemble it. The other trick is that gets a little tougher is you got to press the bushings out, both of the upper and lower A-arms. Those are the tough ones. You got to push the lower A-arm ball joints got to be pressed out too. So we'll get into that in just a second. Let me talk about the upper ball joint here. If you notice, it's got 4 bolts in it. When you take an original apart, you'll find it doesn't have 4 bolts. It has 4 rivets. And the shop manual says drill them, then take a chisel and cut them off and drive them out. You can do that. They're kind of a pain. What I would suggest is you go to good old Harbor Freight, and for $9.95, you can get you one of these beauties here with a cutoff wheel, and you can just cut these babies off and grind it all nice and smooth, tap them out, and you may need this. I'll talk to another place you may need this in a little bit. So it's worth the $9.95 to buy one of these things. You'll find it pretty handy. So anyway, once you get that one, you can take the top ball joint apart. When you go to the lower ones, you got to be kind of careful. Take some tools. These press out. Usually you have to find a press, either an arbor press or hydraulic press can usually press these things out. But I have seen people use what I call a zip gun or an air chisel and drive these things out, and that works pretty good too. I made a couple little things. This one's out of like heavy plastic. If you want to put something like that into this A-arm as you're working on it, so you don't collapse this. You want to keep that dimension the same. This is a plastic one. It works okay. I also got a metal one. I just took a piece of pipe and cut it so I can slip that on there, and that holds that dimension. And I think there's a J tool in the shop manual for that, but these are something like that's easy to make. You'll need that pressing it out, mainly pressing it back in. So as you press these in, you can collapse this and kind of screws it up if you're not careful. So the upper A arm, let me grab on here. This is the upper. This actually happens to be an early model, but it's very similar. You need to do something with this too. And what I did for years is I cut a piece of angle, which is the right dimension to slip right in there, and that holds that dimension. If you can get your hands on one, this is actually the correct tool. This is the J tool that the shop manual shows that you sit in there. That holds that dimension. So as you press those things in and out, you don't change the width dimension on this part. So while we're talking on this one, there's a difference between an early and a late. Don't ask me why. It's kind of weird. The late models are real straightforward. You just press the bushing in from this end, you press the bushing in from that end. Everything's cool. Early models, they welded an extra little piece on here, and they press this bushing in from this side and this bushing in this way. So the axles, what I call axle, this little thing here, it's this is an early model. You notice the early model, this end is a little shorter, this end is a little longer. So it needs the longer one, obviously down here, where they've welded an extra piece on there for some reason. So you got to make sure that you don't make the mistake like I did a few years ago. I was walking by Lon Wall, rest in peace, Lon, his table at the convention. I saw a box full of upper A-arm bushings. Nice, these are urethane, nice ones. I said, oh, I need 4 of those. So I picked up 4 and bought them. Turns out I bought the ones that fit the oddball, the long shaft on an early model. Doesn't fit the other side, doesn't fit the late model. So since I don't have any early model cars, these are basically useless to me. So, but make sure you get, it's kind of an interesting thing. I just didn't realize that for a long time. But anyhow, I was going to back up to, I know some of you may not have access to a press or a lot of this stuff. The first time I did one of these, I didn't have access to anything either, but I kind of buddied up with a tire shop that did alignment and stuff like that. So once I took it all out of the car, I cleaned it up, took the A-arms off, what I could. I took those down to this shop and talked the guy into pressing the bushings out for me and pressing them back in. And he didn't charge me much of anything, but most shops that have a press, they know how to do that. They can help you out if you don't have access to it. This one here, I actually borrowed Lou Pinard's Arbor press, which I had never used before. We had a hydraulic press where I used to work, and I had used it before. But the Arbor press is kind of nice because as you pull the handle down, it's just your strength, but you can feel the bushing going in. If it binds up or something, you know it immediately. Or with that hydraulic press, so they just kept on pushing. So I kind of liked using it. It worked out well. So, but if you don't have access to it, you can, like I said, find you a buddy at the tire shop, and they'll help you out. It's not a big deal. Okay. The next thing is, well, let me back up a second. Before, everybody always warns you about the springs when you disassemble these ball joints and or lower A-arm to be careful, because these springs can fly out. They particularly worse if you have the stock springs that, believe it or not, the heavy duty springs that are shorter, like these actually are heavy duty, which have had one loop cut off of them, so they're extra short, but they're not a big problem. But I always just to be careful, I always tie a piece of heavy rope around them and tie it to something just to make sure they don't fly around and hit me. So you need to be careful on that. And I think the shop manual emphasizes that too. So that's something you need to look out for. Okay, just to mention a couple other things. Once now we've got it all taken apart. The other part that's going to fight with you a lot is these little jewels here.
Hey, Mike, we did just
anyway
hey, Mike.
Yeah,
we did just get a question that pertains to what you're holding in your hand. A question came up about how do you clean? What do you suggest on how you clean the threads on that?
the threads on this.
Yeah, any suggestions on cleaning the threads?
The only way I have to clean them is wire brush. I just wire brush them a lot with a fine wire brush and clean them up. I don't have a dye for it. I wish I did. If I could run a dye up and clean them up, that would be ideal. But I've had pretty good luck cleaning them up with a wire brush. Lubricate them a little bit with a little grease or WD-40 or something, and you can usually. This is a locking nut, so it doesn't go up that easy. But if I had a regular nut here, which I don't have, this one's pretty clean. You can run them up and down, and you want to have this so you can move them up and down, because when you get this back in the car, you're going to want to use these. This is your caster adjustment to adjust your caster. So yeah, you want to have these things working smoothly, and I'm sure some of the mechanics, maybe Larry or Claypool or some of them, they may have a die that fits that, but I haven't. It's not one that you're going to find at your local hardware store. It's probably a pretty specialized die. Okay. The next thing I'm going to talk about, let's see, let's talk about the sway bar a little bit, since I got it where you can see it. This is our sway bar under the bottom. It actually has 6 bushings on this sway bar. You can actually see 4 of them. 2 of them, you probably, if you haven't had one of these apart, you probably don't know they exist, but the sway bar is attached in the suspension by a part that looks like this. This is the bottom part that's, you'll see, yeah, right down here. Mine's black in this car. And it has a special rubber. It's a little different on some of the earliest than the lates, but it's basically the same thing. Clark's now sells, which he didn't for a long time, a bushing deal in here. These were originally, the top of these were originally, vulcanized in, but the bushing the rubber bushing he sells is real nice. Takes this nice big fat sleeve. And you got to fight that in there too. It's you can do it with your hands, but little lubrication and a little bit of work, you can get this thing in, having your new bushing in it. And it's bolted in right here with this bolt here, holds it up here. Of course, these weren't used until 64. I'm not sure about if you could get them on early or not, but I know they were standard on all Corvair 64 and later, the sway bars. And but this sway bars, it requires a little bit of wrestling to get these bushings in place and get them around. You got to lube them up, fight them around these bends, and you can. But a little bit of muscle, a little bit of time, you can get them in there. They're not too bad, but it's there's no secret other than just that I know of, other than just force them in place, and you get them all in there. It works out real nice. Now the sway bar is one place that I have not used I put new hardware in here. Normally what I put is on the sway bars and also on these tie rod end clamps. I usually buy stainless steel bolts and put in them just because they stay so nice looking, and they're not as critical as some of these up here as far as strength goes. So, okay. Now that we have the sway bar in, we'll talk about a couple other little things. Oh, I didn't mention shocks. That's another thing. This is the shock that you'll pull out, of course, and the stock shock has this big rubber bumper on top of it. You'll probably, in a lot of cases, when you take these apart, you'll find they don't have these. These are available from Clark's, and you should have those. It's a bottoming out thing. So if the suspension bottoms out, it bottoms out on this rubber. If you happen to, just for the fun of it, if you happen to have these nice Coney shocks that I'm going to be putting on this one, they came with the extra big bumper on top of them. So on these shocks, you don't use those. So anyway. Of course, the late model has a tube across the bottom that long bolt goes through, and in this lower A arm, long bolt goes through the shock like this. Early models, of course, had I got an early model here. It has a flange plate here, shock bolts in here. The only problem you ever have, the late models, you got to make sure you got a good bolt and get this thing really tight, because you actually want to squeeze that metal down onto these. It's got little serrated ends on it. You want to squeeze that very tight, because if you don't, these things will rattle and squeak and drive you crazy. So make sure you have that bolt nice and tight when you put these shocks in. All right, let's see. Let's go on to the, this is the idler arm. I have fun painting some of this stuff. I generally try to, a lot of this stuff, I'm not sure, but a lot of the stuff wasn't painted on some of these cast parts. Most of the metal parts were, and like the tie rod ends, obviously I can't powder coat those, so I paint them, and I usually paint them. What I like to use, and I think it looks cool, is this. I use this plastic coat. This is Rebuilder's Cast Finish. I like to use that because and I use this on my master cylinders, anything that was a cast part. And I've tried a couple of the brands, but I like this plastic coat the best. It just looks very good. It looks very original. So just looks like bare metal. So that's what this part is. This is evidently an aftermarket one. This is a new one. I painted it black, but it's got a grease cert on it. Original one did not have. But This is a pricey part here, but if you need it, you need it. It's I just see. I happen to have that in. It's a $87 part from Clark's, and I don't know where else you can get them, but it's a part that's quite often loose. So you want to make sure that's once you got this thing out of the car and you're replacing all this stuff, most of that, it can run into a few bucks, but you might as well do it while you got it here. Looking at it. On the sister part, I'll call it, to this idler arm is the Pittman arm, which is this one. This goes on the steering box. So these work, together. This is on the passenger side. This is on the steering box. So that one I painted this pretty cast finish also. So that will go on there. I might as well hold on. While I'm showing this nice idler arm, I might as well show it on the steering box. It goes on the steering box. There's a way it goes in. Anyway, that's where it is. It works this on this nice factory quick box. So anyhow, let's see. Talk about the tie rod ends. What I do on these, this rod portion of it has been powder coated. These clamps I had plated. And what's interesting about this one, I'll mention one thing. If you notice, one tie rod end has a grease cert here, one has a grease cert here. You need to look and make sure you've got, that's the situation, because if both of them are on the ends, I have had them where on one suspension I did an early model, these things were actually hitting out there, and that's why they on one of them it's in a different location. So make sure you put it on the right direction. And other thing, I know I think these are I think are Clark's tie rod ends, which are really nice. And he talks about his boots being really nice, but my experience has been that these boots have a life of about a year or two, and then the rubber cracks. These are worse. So what I like to do, what I've been doing on the cars, is replacing these boots with urethane boots. You can buy them. This one is called Energy. You can get it at most auto parts stores, online. I'm sure all the online stores have them. And all it says is tie rod end boot, round. I don't know what other, I would assume most all of them are round, but this one says round. And I guess there's more than one size, but I just kind of looked at it and looked right, and they fit nice. I've put these in all my cars that I've done. The urethane boots, nothing's worse than crawling underneath the car to get it ready for concours, and you look and these things are cracked. But these urethane boots, they last. I've never had one crack. They've lasted really good. So you can get those. Like I said, you have to paint your tie rod ends. I would paint them. When you get them, they're not painted, and it's the same deal. You'll work and clean this stuff all up, get underneath the car, and you get under there in 6 months after you've driven it in the rain a couple of times, and all this stuff will be total rust. It'll make you sick. So I try to get everything either powder coated, plated, or painted, or stainless if I can, underneath these things. And then, several years from now, if you want to get it in concours or just want to make it look nice, you get under there, stuff will still look nice. You want to make sure these things turn nice and free in these sleeves. And when you take it to have an alignment done, if you don't do it yourself, you need to stand there and ready to beat the guy that wants to put the pipe wrench or channel locks on these things and scratch them all up. There is, believe it or not, I don't have one. I don't own one. I've borrowed one a couple of times. There is actually a special tool for adjusting these things. I usually have them loose enough that I can adjust it by hand. One of those rubber strap wrenches will work too. Sometimes a small one to turn these things, but don't let the alignment shop put a pipe wrench on here, scratch it all up after you've got it looking so pretty. So that's why you want them nice and free. Put a little grease in there. I put some synthetic Mobile One grease in there, and they stay. See, these are nice and free. Remember, one of them is clockwise, one of them is counterclockwise. Anyway, you'll notice one thing you'll notice here is my clamps. I don't have any bolts in them. The reason for that is, like I said, I was going to put stainless steel bolts in it, so I went and bought the stainless steel bolts that I generally use, which is 1.25 inches, and they're not long enough. So I was like, "What's going on?" So I picked up. This is a stock one, and it's my 1.25 inch bolt works perfect in it. So I don't know where these came from. They're in my stash of stuff, but they're noticeably fatter than the stock. Just move it down. It's they're noticeably fatter. So I was just curious. See, I have my, what is my, oh, here we go. Calipers. I'm going to measure this thing. This thing measures 0.901, 9/10 of an inch. Here's the stock one. It measures 8.2, 0.8 of an inch. So definitely fatter. So I was curious. This is another one I had laying around. What's it? It's 8.6. So it's right in between these two. So I was still curious. So I happen to have some Clarks. This is a C181 Clarks. I won't take it out of the bag, but it'll be close enough. His are 8.25. So his are darn near close to they're almost exactly stock. So that's good. His are stock. Now, why I've got these fatter ones, I don't know. Maybe these are used on, they use this pretty much same thing, I think, on all cars. Probably this could be off of a big car, maybe an Impala or something, but I'm going to use it. It'll work fine. I had this nice, pretty one. So I'm sure I picked it up in a box of junk at a swap meet or something. So anyway, you want to make sure those things work nice and free. And these tie in, the way this works, of course, these tie into this rod, which ties over into your arms. You can't see them. The arms are coming out this side. So you tie these in, and this ties to your pitman arm, and this ties to your what I call it, idler arm. I'm sorry, idler arm, and this is your pitman arm. So this will tie in. These aren't hard to put together. I may put them on. Sometimes they're more trouble than they're worth flopping around while you're trying to get back in the car. It's pretty easy to put on once it's back in the car. So you may want to wait. So, all right, let's see. We're pretty good there. One thing I wanted to talk about was these lower ball joints that we're pressing in and out. I helped a guy a couple years ago. We were rebuilding his suspension, and he orders one of those suspension kits on eBay or one of the auto parts stores. It's got all the parts you ever need, which of course it wasn't all the parts you ever needed, but when I started putting it together, and I said, those lower ball joints aren't right. There's 60 lower ball joints. The 60 had a unique lower ball joint. It looks like this. It's got a hex 6-sided bottom. It's got threads on it. They were actually screw-in lower ball joints. Late 60 and all the way to 69, these were smooth and they press in. Anyway, so I said, no, I'm not going to put those. We're not going to press those in. They're wrong. So he called the supplier up, and the supplier said, no, you just they'll work, just push real hard. So they will work real hard. They will. If you got hopefully a hydraulic press, probably 30, 40 tons will push those things right in. The only problem is once you use these, if you press these in, you're gonna expand this hole in your lower A arm. So from then on, the stock ones will never work. I had that happen once. I had some arms. I couldn't figure out why the lower ball joints just fell into the hole. Well, the reason they just fell in the hole, somebody had put a set of these in. So get the right ones. If the ones that Clark sells now, the ball joints, both the upper and lowers, are really nice, and I really like him. He's done a good job. They got nice boots on them. Work great. You maybe can save yourself a couple bucks with one of those online kits from wherever, and but it may work, it may not. I've had good luck with like I said, I think Cal's done a really good job on those ball joints, because he didn't always have them. In fact, I think one of these boxes, yeah, I think this was an old Atlas box. I think it actually had a Clark's number on it at one time. So he was selling different brands. This is one. You can see this box here happens to have a Clark's number on it. This is a Parts Master. I think he sells his own now. This is an older one. This is a lower A-arm bushing. These are kind of weird, and they have a lot of rubber on them here, kind of little bit in your way to press it in, but I'm sure they'll be okay. But he's repro'd a lot of these parts now that are a lot better than some of the ones that we were finding on the aftermarket a few years ago. So how we doing? I'm looking at my clock here. Oh, we're just getting started. Let's see what else I got. Oh, I want to talk about these bolts here that hold the lower A arms in. On a late model, the bolt looks like this. It has a eccentric cam in it. This is how you adjust your camber. You just can rotate this. It moves that arm in and out, and you can set it. Now, if you have an early model, it just has a plain bolt down here. It doesn't have this little fancy bolt. So the only way you can adjust that camber is you loosen these bolts up here on top of this little axle, and you move your upper A arm in and out, put shims under it and tighten it down. That's a little bit more trouble. So they came up with this idea, and I think GM was not the only one that has a similar deal. But what I would say is, when you're taking it apart, this was one that came out of some suspension. It's been cleaned and replated, but you can see it's pretty eat up. I don't know if I'd use it or not, but it'd probably be okay. But these are strong bolts, so you're going to be careful. They got some load on them. This is an aftermarket one. You can tell by the big old head on this thing. And when I was doing this suspension the first time, when I had the guy at the tire shop helping me, he also sold a lot of bushings and stuff. When I pulled these out, the ones that are in here now, actually, they were bad. They were rusted. So we went over in his parts bin and started digging through it, and he found two that were perfect, which is what's in it now. And he said he thought they were out of a Plymouth or something. So these almost same bolts were used in more than just Corvair. So, but Clark's, the ones he sells now, they're pretty good, but the only difference is the way this is, the washer's pressed on. It's got the flat here, like this one has a flat where you can slide. This one slides on the flats, so you end up with the two like that. But what Cal does, he takes a regular bolt, he machines the whole surface of it down flat, then he slides this all the way down, and kind of makes it. But these are pricey, so if you can save them, in fact, let me look and see what it is. I wrote this down. Oh, this one, this thing with the complete is $29.20. So these are pricey little things, but you gotta have them, and you gotta be good, because you want them. You got to have them to adjust, and you want them to be in good shape, because they do take they do take a load. So that's way that's the other thing. Let's see what else I want to talk about. The rubber bumper up here. I would say if you're going to redo your suspension like this and leave it sitting around for 3 or 4 years, I'd leave these things off because the spring is compressing this bumper without the weight of the car. That thing is being mashed pretty hard. I went ahead and put them on because I hope to put this in a car before too much longer. And you can do them within the car. You got to kind of stand on your head and really force those things in, which can be a lot of fun. So another thing I wanted to talk about, on the end of this thing here, we have the pitman arm bushing, which goes through here. It's got a bolt like this, and there's a bushing that goes in there. The original factory one looked like this. It has of course, a metal sleeve. It's rubber. It goes in here, presses in. Now, with like a lot of these components, what you don't realize the way they work is this shaft does not turn into rubber. The rubber does not slide in the sleeve. What it actually does is twist the rubber. And that was an innovation actually, because that prevented old cars had to be lubed they lube them every 2,000 miles or something. They start squeaking. That's because all this stuff was sliding. When they came up with molding the rubber in them, both in the these tie rod ends and a lot of the bushings, like the lower A-arm bushings are the same way. Let's bring this one up. I was just looking at it. This has a sleeve. This rubber was vulcanized both to the sleeve, the metal sleeve inside, as well as to the housing. So when these went up and down, nothing slid on it. It actually twists the rubber. So the important thing about that to remember is it's the same thing with the uppers, the lowers, and the pitman arm bushing. Is when you put this thing together, do not tighten this stuff up. Keep them loose. Keep them nice and loose. And because once you get it in the car, get weight in the car. If your car is not complete, put some weight in the trunk. I usually jump up and down in the trunk a little bit, get this thing settled in, then get down underneath there and tighten up these upper A-arm bushings, lower A-arm bushings, pitman arm bushing. But don't tighten those up with the car unloaded. And when you tighten up this pitman arm bushing, if you're using the rubber one particularly, you want to have the wheels straight. If you turn the wheels all the way to the side where you can get under there real easy, you tighten this thing up, you turn the wheels back straight, you're stressing this rubber, it'll last a month or two. So what you want to do is you want this rubber to be relaxed state when the wheels are straight. So you don't tighten this down until the wheels are straight. Now, to put the stock one in, you've got to remove this sleeve, because chances are when you take this apart, the rubber's gone, it's just going to fall apart, but the sleeve is going to still be in here. That can be tricky. You can take a hacksaw and saw it. You can, like we were talking before, you can sometimes take a little zip gun or impact hammer and drive that thing out of there. But if you don't want to do all that, the solution is you get a Clark sells a nylon one. The nylon one doesn't come with the sleeve. Well, it does come with the sleeve if you want it, but you don't need to. Just leave the sleeve in here. This one's still got it in there. Now I'll just press this nylon in there with the bolt. Saves me having to get that sleeve out of there. And then you have a nylon one. And this pitman arm bushing is probably the first thing to fail on the front suspension in a Corvair. So I've gotten underneath cars, even mine, this thing was years ago when I had rubber ones in all of them, and this thing was totally gone. No sign of rubber. So what's interesting too is I have a bunch of different bolts that came out of these things. This I believe to be a GM original pitman arm bushing. This is some aftermarket pitman arm bushing. Notice it's got a big head. Then I got a couple others. This is a, let's see. How about this one? This is a different one. Got a little serrated thing where rubber. So obviously back in the 60s and 70s, because these things were failing so much, everybody was making them. You probably get them at any auto parts store. Anybody that made rubber suspension components was making these. So there's a lot of them around, but I don't have any problem with the rubber ones, but it's probably on the cars that we don't drive as much anymore. They probably will last a good while if you put them in right. The nylon ones, this is what I have in my cars. They work fine. I don't notice any difference in the steering wheel feel or anything. Just for the heck of it, this is a new improved plastic. This is a black pitman arm bushing. This one came from Lawn Wall, and I've had it in his little package here. He sold these for $6.50. So I probably picked this up at the convention. I have a few of them, but I liked it because they were black. I don't know. I don't know if Clark's has black or not, but I know he has the white nylon most of them now. So. Okay, I'm getting low on good stuff to show, but we're getting, how much time have we used up? Oh, man, I'm doing good. Uh-oh, boss is giving me the 5-minute message. Okay, a couple quick things I want to say. When you get these things, even from Clark's, these bushings, they're bare metal, and that's another thing. When you get underneath the car in 6 months, they're all going to be rusty. What I do, like in this one, after I pressed all the bushings in, all these bushings are bare metal, and they'll all be rusty next time you get down under if you don't do something. What you might want to do, particularly if you're going to paint your suspension, is go ahead and press the bushings in before you paint it. That way you get your bushings painted nice and black and they won't rust. Since this was powder coated, I had to put them in later. So what I do is I go back with a little artist brush, paint all these things with, I use this Hammerite paint, which you may or may not be able to see me. That stuff seems to hold up pretty good. And okay, then the big question everybody wants to know: how much money is this going to cost me to redo this system? It's not a cheap thing, particularly if you're talking about shocks, which I'm not going to talk about too much. But I went through and totaled up all the parts I used on this suspension. Of course, the Allen arm, which is, like I said earlier, is $87. Pitman arm bushing, that's this rubber one I showed you, the original style. It's $21.75. Anyway, you add all this stuff up with a few odds and ends that you may or may not need, I get $735 worth of parts. That doesn't count powder coating, and it doesn't count the plating, of course. And if you need, buy new bolts. That's not in there, but it's worth it. When you get done, I love building these things. They're fun to put together. They look nothing more fun than taking an old rusty, ugly thing and get it all done. It looks so pretty like this, and I like to make it look pretty. So anyway, if you, it's a fun job. It's not that bad. Like I said, it comes out of the car easy. You can work everything on top. No laying on your back. You can do everything on a bench like this. It's fun. So happy Corvair.